Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This webinar is an integral part of our ongoing events within the Merit Leadership community and represents the place where corporate and higher education leaders meet. We have approximately 150 participants in this webinar today, and it's a pretty impressive number. This group is composed for the most part of executives in the area of human resource learning and development. I'd like to give special thanks to all of our corporate members with us today, as well as the key business schools that are joining us. We're very excited that all of you are here. So, due to increased pressure from digital and organizational change, professions and career paths are changing for most people. Many jobs of today will simply disappear. And the job of HR professionals is to help employees and organizations navigate this digital transformation effectively. A growth rather than set mindset will be required in order to make this happen. So it's possible that talents can be nurtured, further developed, and mistakes can be leveraged for continued growth. Today's webinar, led by Lisa Danels, will focus on why a growth mindset is critical in today's world of constant change and how it can be used as one lever to drive cultural change and business performance. With 30 years and extensive global experience in the area of leadership, talent, and organizational development, Lisa Danels, Executive Director of Human Edge Consultancy, shares with us her perspectives on the importance of developing a growth mindset. In both the US and Europe, Ms. Danels has functioned in many senior positions. She's been Global Head of Talent Innovation for Novartis, President of Integrated Leadership, a consulting firm, Vice President of Leadership and Management Development with MetLife, Director of Leadership and Development with Pfizer. She's worked in the same area with Chase Manhattan Bank and American Express. So many key senior positions in this area in her background. Her current company, Human Edge, is a leading consultancy that enables organizations to create ready now talent and deliver on their business strategies. So we are absolutely honored and pleased to have Lisa with us today, leading this Merit Summit community webinar. And we hope that you will stay with us the entire time and join in a Q&A session in about 40 minutes. I would like to ask you to put your questions through the question function and not through the chat function, because that's where we'll be looking for your questions. Without further ado, Lisa, we welcome you.
Great, thank you, Kurt. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity to partner with the Merit Group. It's been a real joy for both myself and for Christian. So I want to talk about growth mindset and how we can increase individual and organizational agility. So in today's organization, the big buzzword we keep hearing is agility, agility, agility. And it's critical in today's world to stay competitive. Kurt mentioned that jobs are disappearing, AI is coming in, and the world around us is not only changing, but it's changing faster and faster. And the need to learn faster has never been greater. And when I work with senior leaders, the number one thing they say is how can we help our people learn faster? We don't know how to do it, we need help. So this session is really geared to help you understand first what a growth mindset is and what is the impact it can have both on individuals in your organization as well as your organization as a whole. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through some of the growth mindset and the research associated with it, because we like to have science behind the areas that we focus in on. Then we're going to talk about what does it mean in organizations, what are some tools and strategies to develop a growth mindset culture and skills, how do companies approach growth mindset, what have top companies done to embed it into their culture, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we have done in terms of what tools and practices we have that can help different companies. So let's first then let's go to the first polling question so we can test kind of what your knowledge is of growth mindset. So what is a growth mindset? So take a moment to identify which one you think is the right answer.
Okay, Lisa, we have about 83% of the people who have voted.
Great.
80% believe you can learn new skills. 16% you are no longer afraid of making mistakes. And 4% if you think positive everything in life.
Fantastic. So 80% of the group, you are moving in the right direction of your understanding of growth mindset. So let's unpack it a little bit more and jump into the content. So if you're familiar with this wonderful woman who has done 30 years of research, she comes from Stanford University. Her name is Carol Dweck, and she has dedicated her career to really studying the brain and understanding how fixed mindset can be changed into a growth mindset. She was really fascinated, and she started her research by wondering why certain children thrive when presented with difficult challenges and why other people felt diminished and their self-esteem went down and they gave up. And this really, it really intrigued her to understand why this happened. So through her research, she coined the term fixed and growth mindset, and she is responsible really for this growth mindset revolution that first hit schools and now has hit both the business world and the technology field. So let's go a little bit deeper understanding so you have a sense of what is this fixed and growth mindset. So we have, when two people are faced with the same challenge, they can have two very different responses. When you have someone with a fixed mindset, you hear words like, failure is limit of my abilities, I don't like being challenged, when I'm frustrated, I give up. Those are the type of things we hear. And the key thing is the underlying belief that these people have who have a fixed mindset is that it's limitation, that things are limited, their abilities are limited, what they were given, their gifts are limited. So they tend to get more stuck to what they know rather than to go outside their comfort zone. And if we look at when an individual has a growth mindset, what we hear words like failure is an opportunity to grow, feedback is constructive, challenges help me grow. And what you see in this case, you see the underlying belief is about expansion and growth, even if it requires effort and it might seem difficult. So that's a big change. So let's spend a little bit more time going through a deeper understanding of growth mindset. So if we think about growth mindset and the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset, you'll see people with a growth mindset actively seeking out challenges. And that's a big difference because you see people who might have a fixed mindset, or they might be more in the middle because it is a continuum, it's not black or white. And what you find is they might, if asked, they might take a challenge. But people with a real strong growth mind will actively seek out that challenge. And when they're faced with difficulties or setbacks, like we all are in life, they see it as an opportunity to get better. They think, how can I climb around this wall or go over this wall in a different way? And the one big difference with people with a growth mindset is they see criticism as a chance to grow. They don't see it as a personal attack, and they're not afraid to seek out feedback. And they use it as a way to get better and master themselves and their capabilities. And one unique feature, which you see in the last bullet, is that they find other people's success inspirational. So these are the type of people who seek out stories, who listen to other people's success stories. They might read biographies about people, and they want to know how these other people have achieved success. They want to know how they can learn from them. And while other people with a fixed mindset might feel threatened by or even get competitive with other people, people with a growth mindset see as an opportunity for reflection of what behavior can lead to success. So they try to emulate these people. So now let's go to an example. So if we can put up the next polling question, that would be great. So Gia is a quick learner and innovative at work, but can't seem to learn a foreign language. She's been in a foreign country for a long time. What type of mindset do you think she has? Okay, so you guys are really on track here, 68%. And that is very much true, is that the growth mindset and fixed mindset are not fixed. They're not binary. It's not black or white. Fixed and growth mindset is a continuum, and you can have a fixed mindset in one area of your life and a growth mindset in the other. And for example, the name has been protected, but when you look at this question, this is my own experience in life, where growth mindset at work, but when it comes to foreign languages, it's a little challenging. So this is an area for me to think about, how do I do that a little bit differently? So let's understand a bit more about the brain and how we're wired, which impacts our fixed or growth mindset. So our brain is very complex, and as there's been more research on the brain, we find more things. And over our human evolution, what stands out is our brain gravitates towards being able to predict and control. Now, it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's actually not, because it comes from our need to survive as a species. And therefore, we want to feel safe, and we feel safe with what is familiar. However, this inhibits us from fully living our potential and learning. So we need to learn how to step into a growth mindset, because it doesn't always come natural for everybody. So what stops us from learning faster? What gets in our way? And one of the things that gets in our way is the amygdala. Is the brain. In the brain is the source of fear. So it's that little purple dot that you see on the screen. And it's what we call the ancient part of our brain. It's responsible for the fight or flight tendency. If any of you are familiar with the amygdala hijack, it comes from here. And when introduced to new challenges or something is very difficult, it triggers a threat response and it stops us from learning. And when we stop learning, we seek safety. This part of the brain helps us survive. It's the reason why we are nervous. And there is a part of us that wants to look good. It keeps us safe, but at the same time, it does one other thing, which is not so positive, is we tend to play it small, and we rather look good than looking like we don't know what we're doing. And that is one of the challenges that you see. And what it does is any type of learning event triggers what the amygdala hates. And this can this can stop us from learning. So one of the things we need to understand is how do we change this experience that we're having so that we don't see learning in a bad way, but we see it as a different way. So when you look at the understanding of this, you have to go back to putting yourself in a meeting room. And do you ever wonder why certain people do not volunteer? They'll put their head down, they get quiet when the leader asks someone to step up or another member of the team, even though it's an amazing opportunity for them. And the research from Columbia University found that when challenges trigger the amygdala, people's reaction is to become stressed, and their anxiety level goes significantly up, and they almost can go into a panic mode. This causes people to avoid challenges, thus limiting their growth. They're not really, it's not that they don't want to, it's that they actually have a physical reaction to it. However, there are people who do raise their hand and do step up to these opportunities. And what is the difference? And that's an important part. And in this other case, the brain gets activated, a different part of the brain gets activated, which is more about the frontal lobe, the front part of our brain, which is more the part that developed last in our evolution. And this triggers what we call a good stress response, meaning that an opportunity to learn and grow. And that opportunity is saying, hey, I can step up to this. I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out. And from research, we know that the brain is very malleable. And we know it's called neuroplasticity. And if we want to grow and learn, we need to really embrace 3 key concepts in order to grow. And the first one is this understanding of familiar and unfamiliar. So like I said before, the brain doesn't like what's unfamiliar. So what we need to do is we need to grow and change. We need to make the unfamiliar familiar. And we do this. So let me give you an example. So for example, if you never exercise, if you're one of those people that likes to talk about it but doesn't do it, and it's unfamiliar, it's not in your daily habits, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. In order to make it familiar, you'll need to take action over and over, which causes your thinking to change and become comfortable over time. This allows you to expand your comfort zone and rewire your brain. And that's an important piece because we have to learn when something is outside our comfort zone, how can we make it familiar? So the next one we're going to look at is what's called the 80-20 rule. And in order to grow and develop, we need to step outside our comfort zone and embrace fear. And that sounds a little bit odd, but we will never get rid of the fear. And the idea is not to. But with small steps, we can learn to master the fear, and we can continue to grow and learn. I like to use the rule of thumb, which is 80% I stay in my comfort zone, and 20% I push myself. And this is in all areas of your life. So if you think about it now, if you had 30 seconds of absolute insane courage right now, what challenge would you take up? What would that 20% look like for yourself? And then the last one that we want to talk about is we want to talk about this concept, and I'm sure you've heard of it before. There's this wonderful book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And this is saying that when you do feel the fear, use it as a compass to know that you're on the right track. Now, usually we don't like to feel the fear and we want to move through it, but this is a wonderful opportunity to step up and to keep moving. So there's this great author, a very well-known author, and she talks about self-mastery. Her name is Erica Anderson, and she wrote a best-selling book called Be Bad First. And one of the things she found is that people who become great, no matter what their field or endeavor, are those who are willing to be uncomfortable over and over again on their way to mastery. And if you continually challenge your own preference for being good at things, for being competent, and be willing to instead be in that awkward place, that uncomfortable place, that beginner's mind, I don't really understand this right now, that you can accomplish most things. So let's go to the next polling question. So now I want you to think about yourself, right? And think about that continuum of the growth and fixed mindset. And where are you? How easy is it for you to go outside your comfort zone? Select one of the following. I'll wait for the votes to come in.
About 88% of the people that have voted.
Great. So you'll see there is a continuum about this. And now we want to talk about when we go into what does it mean for organizations and how do we start to move into moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So we'll talk about this in terms of what does it mean for organizations. So first I want to address your attention to the left side. And what Carol Dweck found through her research as she started to work with organizations is that people who have 40% of employees are more likely to say their colleagues are trustworthy than in a fixed mindset. And what you see is employees view their companies very differently depending upon if they had a growth or fixed mindset. So you'll see here 34% of employees are likely to have a strong sense of ownership and commitment to their organization than fixed mindset peers. Interesting. 65% of employees are likely to say their organization supports risk-taking than their fixed mindset peers. So if somebody has a growth mindset, they see their organization very differently. And finally, 49% are more likely to say their organizations foster innovation than their fixed mindset peers. So now let's go to the benefits of having a growth mindset culture. And when we talk about the benefits, there's a huge benefit to cultivating a growth mindset culture. And we define a growth mindset. First, it's important to define it where all employees are seen as possessing potential. They're encouraged to develop and acknowledged and rewarded for improvement. So it's not just the pass fail, or you accomplished it or you didn't accomplish it. And when we look at these attributes, what we see that cultures are critical. The mindset of a growth mindset is critical to enable change and processes, because employees with a growth mindset, they don't feel like victims, but they feel like they're co-pilots, that they're working with the organization to be able to change and transform it. And with a growth mindset culture, if a growth mindset is present in cultures, guess what? Companies are actually more agile, and they see greater levels of creativity and innovation, higher levels of resilience. They're able to be much more persistent through challenges. They have superior performance. Oh, and they also have higher levels of well-being. And what I found most interesting about the research from the Neuro Leadership Institute is they said when employees were asked about does their company have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset culture, 95% of the people were in agreement if it was one or the other. So it's very clear in terms of when you talk about culture, what does it feel like for an employee to be in a growth mindset culture versus a fixed mindset culture? So now let's talk about what does it feel like to be in a culture that is a fixed mindset culture. And when we talk about this, one of the things you'll see in contrast, people have the fixed mindset culture, and what impact does it have on business performance and agility? Well, you'll notice it has detrimental effects. It creates internal competition in the environment where people need to be smarter or better than other people, so they show people up. This leads also to silo thinking. It limits collaboration and people cutting corners or cheating. So you'll see companies that have a fixed mindset might have problems with compliance, because people think about, well, I have to look good, so they have difficulty. So now I want you to think about, from an HR perspective, right? What does it mean if you have a traditional performance management system where you're ranking people and you're asking them, to think about, how do I be better than other people? So this is a question for you, which is, does the current performance management system keep people keep people trapped in a fixed mindset? So that's an important element that we're talking about here. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask another polling question, which will address, do you believe that you have a fixed mindset culture or a growth mindset culture?
Looks we have about 71% who have voted so far.
Also mixed. So it's really mixed in terms of if the companies are fixed or growth. Very interesting. It would be also interesting to look at what those numbers are relating to performance numbers. So thanks for that, Kurt. So now let's focus in on, what does it mean for a growth mindset? So we talked about the organizational level. Now let's talk about what happens at the team level. So I'm sorry, not the team level. Now we're going to talk about the leader level. So one of the things that the research showed is they showed that at Columbia University, they did some studies about leaders. And they found when leaders progress up the organization and they're more high in the hierarchy and they have more responsibility and more complexity, they actually found that they moved much more towards a fixed mindset. And the reason they moved towards the fixed mindset is they had more to lose and they wanted to look good. And this is a real challenge that they found, because the leader is so important that they have a growth mindset for many reasons. One is that they role model what the organization needs. So if you're trying to get a growth mindset culture, that it's important that you have leaders who have that. But they also found that leaders who have a fixed mindset, that they don't welcome feedback, and they don't empower their staff as much. So they're less willing to empower their staff. So this is really interesting, because what we want leaders to be able to emulate what this growth mindset is. So this is important for them to cultivate it in their organizations. So now we'll look at what happens with teams. So what happens when a team has a low growth mindset? They don't openly express disagreement. They very rarely, they don't readily accept feedback from one another. They always don't listen to each other. There's a decreased confidence when they try new things and they fail, so they're not willing to jump back in, and they don't go for challenging goals. So think about teams that have a fixed mindset and just multiply that by the number of people in the organizations and how that can have such a detrimental impact in terms of for the organization. So now what we want to do is I want to take you through, so I did the organizational level, I did the leader level, I did the team level. Now let's talk about what happens when individuals show up in a fixed or a growth mindset in an organization. So the first one I want to go to is I want to go to the fixed mindset. And what happens when individuals in organizations, if they have a fixed mindset, from the Neural Leadership Institute, they found that the most important thing with a fixed mindset is people want to look good, right, in front of others, and they want to use their current capabilities that they have. And this leads them to making sure that they're proving who they are. So there's a great pressure to perform. So making mistakes and taking risks are not going to be there. They want to demonstrate the great capabilities they have. So they'll do that over and over again. They'll avoid discussing mistakes. So if a mistake is made, they will not learn from it or address it. They might even hide it in the organization and not fess up to something that has gone wrong. They avoid any challenging situations, and they feel much more vulnerable in setbacks. And they focus on performing better than others, so that creates that competitiveness. So you'll see that people with a fixed mindset, they see themselves in the organization and in their environment, they see it as a threat. And what they think about themselves is they think, what if I'm not good enough? Maybe I don't have the skills. I could make a mistake. Others may do it better. So you'll see that there's a lot of doubt in what they're experiencing in the organization. So now let's look at the difference between somebody who has a growth mindset and how that changes. And the big difference is that people who are in a growth mindset, they never compare themselves to other people. They only focus in on getting better than they were yesterday. They focus in on seeing challenges and opportunities as an opportunity to grow. And they're always focusing on improving. Oh, wow, I didn't realize I could do this now that I couldn't do it last year. So they always do the comparison to their own selves, but not to others. They're always developing new skills, seeking feedback from others. They engage in that. They perform better. They're performing better than you did yesterday. They do seek those challenging situations. They want to discuss their mistakes and learn from them. And how do they respond? They see opportunities and challenge. They see any challenge as an opportunity. And they always think what goes on in their mind is, I can get better. I can always improve. This is a great chance for me to develop. And a year ago, there's no way I could have done this well. So they're tracking themselves to each other. Now, let's look at some studies that Columbia University did to talk about so they looked at their graduate students, and they wanted to understand the impact of growth mindset and fixed mindset on performance. And one of the things they found, so I'll take you to the left side of the screen first. So what they found is when there was work that they were given and there were no interruptions, that a fixed mindset actually showed higher levels of performance, right? And then what they did is they introduced interruptions. And when you think of interruptions, they think of that as also changes, things that are constantly changing. And what they found is that the fixed mindset people, the people who had a tendency for more fixed mind, that their performance actually went down. But people with a growth mindset, their performance actually went up. So that's a really interesting finding about why it's so beneficial for organizations. And then the second study that they did at Columbia is they gave people different tests, and they wanted to see if they were told that they did poorly on the test. So they were told that they were given 28% success rate. And for the people who had a growth mindset, what they found is that they were less upset and they actually did better in the next round. And the people who had a fixed mindset, they tended to get so focused on what they didn't do well that they couldn't learn, because what they did is after they gave them the answer, they would tell them what the right answer was. And the people with a fixed mindset couldn't even absorb the information in, and they got more upset, where with the people with a growth mindset, when they retested them, they had a higher level of performance. So this is really important, because what happens is when people have this fixed mindset, their emotional systems actually start to, they have these negative emotions where they can't manage the experience. So that leads to them not being as effective in the organization. So now let's talk about some tools and strategies to develop a growth mindset and culture. So growth mindset right now has been hailed as the defining leadership principle and of top international companies, and it is believed to be one of the core skills that will help individuals fit for the disruptive times that are ahead of us. So when we think about growth mindset, it is believed to be one of the biggest skills. But the one thing that I want to share with you is that companies who have implemented growth mindset, it's not a standalone. That people are not saying, oh, let's just do growth mindset as a learning initiative. What they're seeing is that it's combined with other disruptive initiatives that are going on in the organization. So the Neuro Leadership Institute looked at 20 companies that are implementing growth mindset, and they found that it's important to connect it to something that's already going on in the culture to drive performance. So let's look at now the key findings of what happens when you create a growth mindset. So what are the critical success factors you would want to have in? So the first one they found when they looked at these companies is they found that people really need to understand the benefits and meaning of growth mindset. So why is it important? But why is it important to me? And why is it important to the organization's success? So that's the first thing they found. The second thing they found, which is no big surprise when any of us deal with transformation, is that the top leaders' support is critical. They needed to hear that the top leaders found it important. The other thing they found is to go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is not that easy, that they needed to have habit building activities that were over time. It's something where you can put something through, you can put somebody through one class and then boom, they have a growth mindset. So they needed to embed it into over time so that it would stick. And then the other thing that they found is they found that they really needed to look at their people processes and their talent processes. So if you think about traditional talent management, it's very much geared towards fixed mindset. How many people on succession? How do we identify the high potentials, right? So these were all the elements that they had to rethink. If we're trying to get into a growth mindset culture, we have to think differently about our talent and our human resource processes. And then the next one is around metrics, right? So these companies used engagement as a way of measuring how are we doing on growth mindset. And they kept a focus on implementing a growth mindset, meaning that new transformations were coming, and they knew that it was not just a one shot, but they needed to focus on constant keeping the pulse of where they are with growth mindset. And in addition to that, we know that people come in and out of organizations, so they wanted to make sure that the people who were entering the organization were part of that culture. So part of it is we need to create the conditions for the growth mindset to take hold, and that was one of the key things that happened. So now how are companies doing it? That's one of the key things. So let's use the example of Microsoft. Microsoft is a wonderful example of growth mindset. So when the new CEO came in, although he's not new anymore, it was a couple years ago already, he did two things when he joined. The first thing he did is he created a new business strategy. And he said, in order to enable my business, and in order to enable my business strategy, I need to focus on creating a growth mindset. And if you hear him speak about it, what came about is he has a child who has a learning disability. And he felt very strongly that people learn in different ways and different times, and you have to give people the opportunity to grow. And what they found with the culture is that Microsoft, since they've instituted the new strategy and the growth mindset, they have tripled the value of the company since he took over. And they did a couple of key things. They really looked at it from a holistic approach. They developed leaders to cultivate the growth mindset. So they used leadership development as a way of teaching leaders how to do growth mindset and how to give feedback using growth mindset and how to cultivate that in everyday communication and interactions with their team. They provided individuals with training over time that people can grow and develop. The other thing they did is they made it safe for people to take on high-risk projects, and they rewarded them, not necessarily for if they achieved everything, but they rewarded them for growth. And then they also refined their talent programs and processes, and it gave them an opportunity to people had an opportunity to step out of their role and do something very different to stretch themselves. And then the last thing they did was they did acquisition. So they decided in their acquisition process that they wanted to measure, they wanted to use it as a filter for when they measured people, when they brought people in the organization. So they wanted to bring people in who were more geared towards a growth mindset. So some of the things that it's important when you're putting this into an organization is you need to build awareness. That it's paramount to building a growth mindset. That people need to be aware, because there is that continuum that they have to know what their self-talk is. I'm not good at this. I don't think I can do it. It's not easy for me. And they need to shift to saying, I'm not good at this yet. So it's a real rewiring of the brain that's critical for that to happen. The other thing that needs to happen in terms of how it gets embedded is they have to be willing to experiment. They have to focus over time, and they need a desire to learn from others. So this is another area that was embedded into the Microsoft culture. And then the other example I want to give you is the example from HP. So HP was HP in company, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise separated. They went their separate ways. There was a divesting part. And the company that was left, what they wanted to do is they really wanted to focus in on creating an innovative culture. So this was a driver for them, that they wanted to drive innovation in their business. So they did 4 things that they focused in on creating a culture of growth mindset. One is they promoted continuous learning, and they implemented something called Brain Candy. And you can see that on the left side of the screen. And Brain Candy, AKA, is known as your knowledge management system. How do they make sure knowledge is shared in the organization, and how do you accelerate knowledge? The other thing they did is they wanted to have more meaningful conversations. So in this case, they revamped their performance management system. They removed rankings, which then took it out of that fixed mindset. So that was a critical element for them. And then the last thing they wanted to do at the team level, the third to last thing, is they wanted to guide how work gets done. So they wanted people to anticipate and learn and adapt, make bold moves. So this was all at the team level. And then the last level they did at the individual level, which was they wanted people to commit to change, to grow, to go through that process of shifting wherever they were in the continuum to move to much more towards a growth mindset. So now let's also look at when we look at the holistic approach, what are some of the elements you need to consider? So we talked about that feedback has to be perceived as different. So feedback has to be given different in organizations. So feedback skills have to be implemented. HR processes need to be aligned in order for this growth mindset culture to take place. So we need to think differently about performance management, talent management, acquisition, communication. What are people hearing around growth mindset? How easy is it to make a mistake in the culture? Do people get rewarded or punished? What are the stories that are being told in the organization that will allow this growth mindset culture to embed itself? And the last one is you need to have learning and tools in place in order for that to happen. So now let's go to the next polling question, which is, what is currently driving your interest in embedding the growth mindset into your culture?
Okay, it looks like you have the majority of people who have voted.
Also really mixed again. So digital transformation seems to be the highest one, which is what they also found from the Neural Institute and the learning and the agility. Cool. Okay, so then let's look at then what are some tools to help you measure growth mindset for you to understand it. So one of the things that we did as Human Edge is we created an integrative leadership assessment that looks at traits for high potential, drivers for performance, human performance, which measures your ability to manage your energy, competencies to manage in the VUCA world, and derailers. And as part of our traits, which you'll see on the screen, we measure growth mindset. And we also found a significant amount of positive correlations to other elements in the report. So for example, if you have a high growth mindset, you will see that there's a high correlation to self-development. And then you'll see there's a lot of moderate correlation, positive correlations, which really shows that the growth mindset can unlock other things from a leadership perspective, which is quite good. So the one thing that's also important when we talk about what we found, so when we looked at our research, what we also found is that based on the research from the Neuro Leadership Institute on growth mindset and from our core assessment, we found that growth mindset catalyzes transformation. And that we found that one study showed that people who endorsed a growth mindset had a higher electrical activity in their brain and related to the awareness of making mistakes and how to adjust them. So you'll see that growth mindset is linked to all of these elements. So if someone has a growth mindset, they're more likely to be risk-taking. They're more likely to drive vision and purpose. We talked about the self-development. They'll develop talent better. They'll be more assertive, and they have a higher level of adaptability. So there's great, so if we can help people grow a growth mindset and cultivate that, then we can really be able to drive agility and innovation in the companies that we work in. One of the most critical things. And then lastly, what I just want to share with you is you're welcome to trial our assessment. And then we also offer growth mindset workshops, lunch and learns, which are much more interactive sessions, working sessions, which are really in-depth to help people accelerate their ability to growth mindset, and tools to support the cultural transformation. So that is what I wanted to share today. The other thing that's important as well is that we will be doing a more detailed, in-depth workshop at the Merit Conference, which is going to be held in Seville, Spain. So I hope to see you there. The purpose of the whole conference is about leveraging a mindset of innovation. And we know that growth mindset and cultivating a growth mindset culture is part of that journey for organizations. So I want to leave you with a quote from the CEO of Microsoft, which is, "Don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all." So I want to finish with that, and I'm going to turn it over to Kurt for Q&A.
Okay, we should be back now. All right. What I'd like to do with our last few minutes is send a few questions on to you, Lisa. And one of the first questions that came up was, what types of organizations are most actively seeking growth mindsets right now? Are there certain types of organizations that are more desirous or more needing of changing their mindsets at the moment, in your experience?
So the experience that we've seen is the two big ones, the three big ones really have to do with digital transformation, have to do with agility. So organizations are moving from very hierarchical organizations to networked organizations, and that changes the game for how the organization operates and how it's structured and how people need to grow and develop and interact with each other and be more collaborative. And the third one, which is the Microsoft example, which was around business strategy, a fundamental change in their business strategy. Those are the three that we've seen.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that there's a difference between small to medium-sized enterprises versus larger organizations, or is the growth mindset really helpful in all different types of organizations?
I think it's helpful in more different organizations, but one of the things we have seen is that growth mindset is much more prevalent in the US than it is in Europe. So it seems to be, it's more embedded, maybe because Carol Dweck came out of the US, so companies have picked it up more, but it hasn't really gotten traction in Europe as much as it has in the US.
Okay, and in your professional opinion, what are the real dangers of organizations that are unable to adopt these growth mindsets? What do you think the negative outcomes will be?
Yeah, so for me, the negative outcomes are going to be that there's going to be more internal competition. In the big trend in organizations is this networked organizations where there's much more flattened organizations where you have higher level of professionals. So if they don't engage in that, then there could be potential where they can't be innovative, and these bigger companies might fall behind because they won't be able to keep up with the more nimble organizations and agile organizations who can innovate much faster. So you might see more blockbusters, these bigger companies who just can't keep up.
Now you work regularly with all types of organizations. For the merit community, I think Europe is, of course, very interesting to most of our attendees. Within the maybe you don't have to give me a name, but maybe with a client that you've worked with recently, in trying to develop that, what are the real challenges, the real sticking points when you try to embed a growth mindset? I was recently at a workshop in Austria, and I was with several really key learning directors, HR and learning directors with big companies there, managing scientific teams, and they were expressing they really needed to help them to be innovative, but these were very fixed mindset people who didn't see themselves as creative, and they were essentially asking the group, what can we do? How do we get this ball rolling?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is there has to be awareness around what type of mindset do you have. So at Hewlett-Packard, they did a great job of giving people a survey to help them understand where they sat on fixed mindset. So then it created a lot of conversation amongst the employees. Where are you? Where am I? And created a little bit of internal pressure for people to want to move towards growth mindset. So I think that's an important thing. The one thing I can tell you is one of the things that's worked very effectively is I was working with a leadership team on growth mindset. And when we looked at the growth mindset of the team, it was quite low in the team. So we were then working with the leadership team on cultivating a growth mindset. So how do we do that? And I think you asked about what are the challenges. The big challenge is that you can't see growth mindset just like culture as an initiative on its own. It has to be tied to something business oriented. Otherwise it fails because people can't have no hook to put it on. So that's one of the things I encourage people to do, that take the growth mindset and embed it into your transformations. I don't know one client that I'm working with who's not going through some type of business transformation. So this is an opportunity to embed it into a piece of work that you're already doing. And it just gives you the lift. So when you talked about the scientists, right, if they understood and were able to do a little bit of workout or were even coached differently, they might see it, they might shift to go into a growth mindset.
Okay. We have a question from Adam, and it says, isn't it that growth mindset and fixed mindset are strictly connected with the personality and the character of the person, and it is really hard to change it?
That is a fantastic question, Adam. And there are tendencies, which are traits, personality traits, and it does. And that's why I said earlier that if you're trying to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, you have to rewire your brain, which means organizations need to give people multiple opportunities and experiences for them to take more baby steps to do it. So it is possible, but it does require effort. So it's a great question. But you can, just like with traits as well, from a leadership perspective or an individual perspective, you can change them. It just takes a little bit more effort because you have to get to a deeper level of the psychology of it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to make a last quick call for questions at this point. Do we have any more questions from our audience today? Just a moment. Okay. All right. Well, I think at this point we don't have any more questions from our audience. Lisa, I would like to thank you so much for joining us with this webinar. You're in Switzerland, I believe, at the moment.
I am.
Okay, wonderful. And obviously, we really look forward to seeing you in Seville, Spain,
Great.
at our upcoming annual event. And I would like to thank everyone in our audience for joining us again for one of our exclusive executive L&D Merit Community webinars. And we will be having another webinar next month. And we'd like to invite you to join us again at that time. So Lisa, thank you very much. And we look forward to working with you again very soon.
Well, thanks everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye.